This video is for lesson 2.1, task 1. So we've been working with integers, which are just whole numbers, any counting numbers, positives, and negatives. We're going to start working with rational numbers now, which are positives and negatives, but they're going to include decimals and fractions that we're going to be comparing. So task number 1 says you can compare fractions by graphing them on a number line. So just like we can do integers, we can also use number lines for rational numbers, and they work the same way. To the right is going to be bigger, to the left is smaller, up is bigger, down is smaller. So it says Mrs. Smith and Mr. Jones each have 30 students in their class. If Mrs. Smith corrected 3/4 of last week's math assignments and Mr. Jones corrected 5/8 of last week's science assignments, which teacher corrected the greater portion of the assignments? So that is the ultimate question we are trying to figure out, is who corrected more? So which teacher corrected more? So what marks on the number line would you need to graph 3/4 and 5/8? So we're trying to figure out, what do we need to graph these? So 4ths and 8ths are not the same. So right, if I cut something into 4 pieces, that's not going to be the same as something cut into 8 pieces. How can we get them to be the same? Well, if you notice, right, I can take these extra lines here and I can add them here. So I can turn 4ths into 8ths. So the marks we're going to need, right, if here is 0, I'm going to need, so here's 0, I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces between. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 becomes that whole one. So we need to make 8ths on our number line. So now we're actually going to graph these on here. So I want you to start with 5/8 and graph 5/8. Now, that should be pretty easy. So let's talk about 3/4. We know we need to turn it into 8ths. So I can draw a picture. So if we had this picture and I'm shading in 3/4, 1, 2, 3. Now we're cutting each of these 4ths in half again. Now how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 8. How did I get from 4 to 8? Well, I times by 2. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. And same applies if we do it to the numerator, we do it to the denominator. So times by 2, 3 times 2 is 6. So now we're going to put 6/8 on our number line. So we should have 5/8. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 8 and 6 out of 8. So this is Mr. Jones and this is Mrs. Smith, right? 1/2. If we look at 1/2 and we turn that into 8ths, it takes 4 times to get from 2 to 8. So times by 4 here equals 4. So 1/2, right? 1 is half of 2, 4 is half of 8. Here's our halfway mark. So they both have graded more than half. So now we're going to look at the locations of these numbers. 3/4 is to the blank of 5/8. So this was 3/4. This is 5/8. And we're saying what side is it on. So here's 5/8. 3/4 is to the, going this way, is to the right of 5/8. So that means, right, it's bigger. So 3/4 is what to 5/8? So you could just, right, it's on the bigger side. When we go this direction, we're getting bigger. So if it's on the right, farther right it is, the bigger it is. So 3/4 is bigger than 5/8. Now we're going to compare. So we want the bigger side to be at 3/4. It's the smaller side to 5/8. And then circle, Mrs. Smith has corrected more or less than Mr. Jones. Right? We can see Smith is bigger than Mr. Jones. So now we're going to use the number line to write an inequality comparing -5/8 and -3/4. So this is what both of the teachers had done, but now we're going to go and talk about the negatives of them. So we know -5/8, here's 0. We're going to the negative side over 5. So here's -5/8. And then -3/4 with 6/8 is here. So -3/4. So we're going to write an inequality to compare these. So we have 5/8, -5/8, and we're going to compare that to -3/4. So when we go to the left, we're getting smaller. So the one that's more on the left is going to be smaller. More to the left is smaller. So that means -3/4 is -3/4 is smaller. So when we're talking positives, right, it's more to the right, so it's bigger. But when we're talking negatives, then it's actually smaller because it's farther away from 0. Both of them are farther away from 0 than 5/8. So you just have to think about which way am I going on my number line. So make sure you have done all of task 1 with me.